Monsieur Anber.
Monsieur Cassavant.
The cup and the mug, I guess, is going to be a staple of the show, right? I believe
I
going
like
forward.
it. I like it. Like it's really become one of my favorite mugs, like except the fact that it's left-handed, like I told you. But I really like it. It holds a lot. It's got the rival colors. I'm very excited. And I've got I don't know if you can see that, my Roy Jones t-shirt today. I decided to wear Roy Jones today. So yeah.
And Roy, who could very well be a guest of the Calling Russ Anber podcast, streaming on YouTube, and we enjoy those who are tuning in for another edition after a week of fights that didn't really happen. There wasn't much that happened in boxing, so we're going to be bringing on soon, in a matter of moments, your first guest. And Roy Jones could be a guest down the road. He would be a great one, but I think this
and a friend of Roy Jones, as a matter of fact, a very good friend of Roy as well.
You mean the one who will be joining us in a few moments here? And it's
yes.
going to be Iceman John Scully that we're going to bring it on. I was looking at his record going into the past few moments here before we actually started recording this, and that 38 victories, 11 defeats, 21 wins by way of knockout. But it's also the longevity of Scully's career, and he's been known, of course, for his coaching and the fighters, of course, that he's had, especially Chad Dawson. So I think it makes a lot of sense to have a guy like Ice on in a week that there's a lot of topics, but not so many big fights that happen over the weekend. It's going to be fun to have him on.
Matthew, I'm going to tell you something, and I don't know if John can hear us or not hear us now while we're talking, but I'm telling you that, and this is going back years now. This is going back to when I was handling Howard and Otis, and Vinny Curto was greatly involved with me in my career and, advising me on things. And I said back then that Vinny Curto and John Scully are two of the best boxing minds I've ever spoken to. And to this day, I still mean that about John. Like, we can literally talk for hours about boxing, of the right, the wrong, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything about boxing. And from someone who's from deep within the sport, and not just, here today, gone tomorrow, from every level, as a competitor, as a coach, as a fan, as a historian, as a keeper of the books, as somebody who understands the traditions of boxing. So it's a real pleasure that we have him on as our first ever guest on this show. So, Scully?
Yes.
Yes,
what's happening?
Everything's good. Beep, beep.
And I first, the last time I saw Ice was at the Hall of Fame, the Boxing Hall of Fame, which I believe probably you go to, Ice, correct me if I'm wrong, but every year. And a few years ago, the last time there was a Hall of Fame ceremony in Canastota, of course, because of COVID, it was delayed, and it's going to happen this June. But we were there for the introduction here for the Quebec fans and the Canadian fight fans, but there was also, of course, some other fighters who were there, and it's always a pleasure to see Scully. And we were also watching a Zab Judah fight the Friday night. Zab, believe it or not, was still fighting prior to the Hall of Fame ceremonies over the weekend.
I'm going to tell you something about Scully. You're going to tell you something about Scully. It's very rare that you find somebody who's as accomplished a fighter and in the business guy, whether as an amateur, a pro, and now as a trainer, that's still such a fan. You don't find guys who are fans. Like, he's a fan of boxing, and that's something really important, that you love it that much. And he's involved with the boxing alumni. He does the meetings of getting people together. He tells people stories about their fights that they don't even know themselves. So it's kind of fun. I mean, we could stay on this for 2 hours and still not run out of ammunition.
Right, we're ready. We're good.
All right, then let's go with some of the topics that really I think are noteworthy from this week, and it's happened in a few hours here for this recording on a Thursday night. It's the Sergey Kovalev test positive for synthetic testosterone, putting his bout in January 30th at the end of the month in jeopardy. It's going to be on DAZN, his first fight back since the Canelo loss. And look, I think when Russ and I saw the story and we're looking at it, is that of Kovalev and Cathy Duva are claiming that it could be tainted supplements, and they're going to be testing to see if the B sample with VADA returns negative. But Ice, I want to get your thoughts first on when Kovalev, that news specifically, and the fact that this drug testing in boxing is probably necessary because we do see a lot of guys who test positive for something.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. This is the era of that, and I will have to, maybe I'm cynical, but I'll have to assume that he's guilty. And these guys aren't the sharpest people in the world. I don't know how they think they can do it and not get caught, but they continue to do it. Guys are getting caught all the time. But that's the game you want to play, and that's what happens. And I think in his case, as the way his career has went these last few years, and he's on his last legs, and he probably feels like he needs an extra boost. And somebody told him, "Oh man, I got the stuff. I got the stuff for you. It's going to be great." And sometimes these guys listen to people who don't know. Like they sound good, and the guy, he thinks he's got a chemist working for him, and meanwhile he's just got some idiot who likes boxing and knows how to get cheap steroids. And so you never know what the thing is. But unfortunately, we're at the point where even if a guy has a legitimate excuse, we don't believe it anymore. We don't believe it. And I'll tell you when I stopped believing anybody in football, NFL football, 25 years ago, I did a talk at a school. Now this is 1992, so more 28 years ago. I did a talk at a school with an NFL player who played for the first 4 Pittsburgh Steelers Super Bowl championships. I was talking about AIDS and HIV prevention, and he was talking about drugs. He told me back in 1992, everybody in the NFL, and he said, everybody is on steroids. He said, your favorite players on steroids. No two ways about it. He said, and they have to be because they can't compete. They'll get murdered. They have to be on it. They'll never compete. They'll never be able to run as fast. They'll never be as strong. So it stands to reason a sport like boxing, guys rely on their power, different things, stamina. They're going to do it. They're going to do it, and they are doing it.
And that's not the first time I've heard something like that. And I heard from it in boxing as well, where people are asking me, what's the drug testing like over there when in such and such a state? What's it like when do they do the testing? Before the fight, after the fight? Inquiring as if to say, well, why? Like, who cares? I never even asked that because I didn't even think about that care. I don't care if it cares before, but they do. And I realized, wow. And I asked why. He says, well, because everybody's doing it. Otherwise it's not a level playing field. And I just think how sad that is, in the world of sports, that we accept that happens. And the other thing that it does is the recuperation powers that you have, that it allows you to train more often, longer, and recuperate better. That's why guys are doing it, so they're able to train twice as long. They don't have to have that rest time. I mean, the thing is, what do you do? Like, what are the consequences to that?
Wait. There's a lot to unpack though, Russ. Just give me a second here, because all right, so you were saying this is the time to do it, but you're referencing also former players in the NFL when it was probably easier to get it done. Now there's a bit more testing. There's also the random testing with VADA. But when you throughout your career, did you ever suspect of anybody you fought or heard of anybody who was taking something, or anybody who tested positive, or you after a fight?
To be honest with you, and I was very naive, and it never even crossed my mind. Like that kind of thing never crossed my mind that anybody would do that. Even if a guy was strong, I was just like, wow, this guy hits hard. I chalked it up to he had good power. It never occurred to me till 10 seconds ago when you just asked me. I've never thought of it like that. I was naive. I'm naive. I think everybody wants to win on their own merits, and they're fair and all that kind of stuff. And it's disappointing because I respect fighters. I respect guys that are really, really good. And it's gonna bother me if I find out some of these guys, were awesome, but they had help.
I'm gonna echo.
So nobody ever approached you either in the gym, right? I guess you've never even heard about it going on in the gym when you were training at any point of your career?
Well, this is after my career was over. I sparred with a guy who I know was on steroids, and he was not an accomplished guy. He was nobody, right? He hit so hard. And the thing was, I saw him in the gym and he looked like he looked, right? I didn't see him for about 2 months. when he came in the gym, he was a different human being. He was a different person. His body had transformed like they sent him to a laboratory and built him, right? And I'm like, man, what's up with this guy? And everybody's like, well, what do you think's up with him? He's been out doing cycles or whatever. And I sparred with him, and he wasn't talented. He wasn't technically sound, but his power, I was like, wow, this guy with small gloves, he might kill somebody. So, you know, it's very, very, very unfair. You know, you're talking about, you know, lethal weapons. You know, a guy's already weight drained, and he's you know, he's impaired, and now you're taking steroids, and you already hit pretty solid, and now you're hitting superhuman, and you're going to hit this guy. I mean, what if you kill him? Do we charge you with murder? Do we charge you with manslaughter? I mean, we got to charge you with something.
And there are so many examples in the sport that you could cite for that, you know, where you've seen it happen, and we don't, you know, because you just don't have the proof, and you can't be throwing people's names out there saying they're doing that. But I want to echo what John said earlier about the naivety of all this. When this first started coming to light, I thought boxers, what they were taking at the time, the first thing I ever heard about was a diuretic, because they needed, and we used to call it piss pills, you know, because they needed to go to the bathroom, because they needed to take a leak, you know, they wanted to do it to make weight. That's what I heard. And then we always used to say, nah, boxers, they don't take drugs because no one wants to be built up. As a matter of fact, boxers stay away from that. You know, that's how naive I was. Nah, they won't do that because that's going to put weight on them, and they're going to get bigger and bulkier, and you don't want to do that. You know, it's counterproductive for boxing. Well, you know, again, my naivety or stupidity showed you how ignorant we were about knowing about that science. And this is something that's not new in sports. This was done in the Eastern Bloc behind the Iron Curtain years before it made it out and into the Western world. Years before they were doing that. So this is not something new. And talking to different people, the line they use is pharmacy, science. That's what they use. That's the evolution that they have for the sport, and what they've done on how much they can maximize your physical performance using nutrition, drugs, vitamins, all the things that they think are going to be better. The science part of it, more than the science of this, it's the science of this, you know, and that's, I think it's across the board in all sports. Even golf.
Yeah,
you know,
but hold on, Les. I just want to stick also to the point with Kovalev, because I just brought up that maybe this is a pressure of nearing the end of his career. He has the bad knockout loss to Canelo, who coincidentally, somebody else who's tested positive at one point for a clenbuterol, and kind of got away with the tainted beef excuse. And really, when you look at Canelo's career, it really hasn't affected much of anything besides Triple G really being angry, of course, and feeling robbed by Canelo. Yeah, exactly. And he's still the most popular guy out there, pound for pound best fighter. And I guess who knows if it was just really the real excuse, or was there more to it? And in the case of Kovalev, though, Russ, you fought Kovalev a few times. He's late in his 30s. Do we really think this is the only time he's ever got caught now? Or can you not be sure that if he was doing this before?
Again, you can't accuse the guy without the proof, right? I can't say, yes, he's doing. I spoke to Jean Pascal. Jean Pascal is convinced that there was something wrong with him before, you know, that he was using before. He says this guy hit, like, how was he, you know, he says, I thought he hit hard, but it felt like he had lead in his fist, you know, that's how hard he was hitting. He was decapitating guys. And he says, I hit him, and he said, nothing happened. He said, other guys smaller than him hit him, and, you know, he's gone, right? So Jean was accusatory of this before, you know, Jean was talking about this. And when I told him about it today, he didn't act like he was surprised about it at all. But we can't make that assumption. All we can say is, whether in baseball, when someone gets caught using a cork bat, you know, it's not the first time that they went to the plate with the cork bat, hit the home run, and that's when they got caught. When you rolled through that stop sign and the cop gave you a ticket, that's not the first time you rolled through that stop sign. You know, I find it hard to believe that on the only time in your entire illustrious career you decided to do that, that's the time you got caught. So It's unfortunate. But I think what's more concerning is, again, I go back to what I said earlier. What do you do? What are the repercussions of this? Pete Rose bet on baseball, not even for he bet for his team, not against his team, as a manager. And as a result, Major League Baseball wrote off 3,000 hits in his career as if they didn't exist anymore. They erased them from the record book and didn't put him in the Hall of Fame. I mean, they didn't erase the 3,000 hits, but in terms of getting him into the Hall of Fame, he's not there. And what are the repercussions for boxing when you commit a serious offense? Antonio Margarito got caught using loaded wraps, which might even be more dangerous than more criminal intent than steroids. He got suspended for a year, and as a reward, they gave him the biggest possible fight you could give somebody, and that was the Pacquiao fight. That was the punishment. Sit out for a year, go to training camp for a year. When you come back, you're going to fight Pacquiao.
And everybody watched it. Everybody wanted to see it. Yeah. Everybody wanted to see it, right? Yeah. They want to see the bad guy. They want to see the guy that got caught. Yeah. We live in a crazy world.
Yeah, but Russ, just in terms of the punishment, when you compare to baseball, compare with the guys who have been accused or used of steroids, and there's even some who are going to be in the Hall of Fame, maybe, although for now, like the Roger Clemens, the Barry Bonds, they haven't been voted in, but they're eligible to be and might be one day. And a lot of people are saying now, because of what Scully was saying in a lot of sports, everybody's using it at one point, or many of the top competitive athletes did. So they kind of figure, you know what, we'll give them a pass because maybe these are just the ones who did get caught and not necessarily the only ones who participated in it. But in boxing, for maybe Mayweather claims to be the guy who wanted to get the drug testing on the map, right? When USADA and then VADA came on board, but Mayweather was kind of the first one to offer this drug testing, or it became more mainstream. And for a while, promoters were doing it. And then when a lot of guys started getting pop, I remember fights like Amir Khan and Andre Berto getting canceled, and promoters are like, well, maybe this isn't such a good idea, that our fights and all this money could go away. Why are we doing this? And you're seeing sporadically now the testing being done, but I just don't know if the punishment is enough, because as a former fighter, do you think they're doing enough punishments? You guys like Jarrell Miller tried 2-3 times before finally getting banned from the sport, and in many cases guys get a slap on the wrist or a few month penalty, especially in the heavyweight division.
Oh, it's a joke. It's a joke. You guys are insane. Like I say, it's serious. It is a serious offense, and these guys are treating it like they're jaywalking. It's not right. And sooner or later, and knock on wood, I hope it doesn't happen, but if somebody gets hurt bad, and then they say, well, this guy that hurt him was definitely failed the test for that fight, now we got a major problem.
And I don't think people care. I think like what you just said, they don't care. Fans don't care. They don't care. It doesn't matter to them. It's not them. It's not their guy. Their guy's not the opponent. They're not working the corner. Doesn't affect their livelihood. They're watching two guys who are beating each other up. They don't care. They don't care about the injustices. They just don't care. I think the money comes first. It's the same thing. We about weigh-ins, when you have weigh-ins and you say, okay, the weigh-in is scheduled for noon, and guys come in and they don't make weight and say, well, it's okay, you got another 2 hours. You've had 4 months since the fight was signed. Why do you need another 2 hours? It's crazy. And then if the guy doesn't make weight, they still try to make an arrangement to pay him to take the fight anyways, because they can't cancel. So they don't care. And I'm not talking about when it's a half a pound difference. I'm talking when it's big weight differences. They pay and say, okay, fight anyways. It's a fallacy that they care. It's a fallacy.
But the fighters do care.
The fighters care. But you know what? A fighter, I'll give you an example. Perfect example. I fought Ernest Mateen. M16 Mateen. He was a contender. He fought James Toney on HBO. Good fighter. I lost the decision to him the first time, but I was really dehydrated and I was actually hallucinating. So I really wanted a rematch really, really bad. So I finally got the opportunity and I called the promoter and I got the rematch. So the weight was 170 178. I trained super hard. It was the first fight I ever had where I came in underweight. I weighed 77 and I was ripped. He was I was supposed to be 178. I was 177. So I go to the weigh-in. I weigh in 177. I go to eat. When I get back, they tell me, oh, you got to go talk to the commissioner. There's a problem. Mateen came in heavy. So I'm thinking 1 pound, 2 pounds, So I go, John, the guy's name was John Burns. I said, John, I don't care, man. I want the fight. He goes, now you understand. He came in at 198 pounds. He weighed 198. I weighed 177. But as a fighter, I wanted the fight, and I didn't have a manager at the time. I was literally by myself, right? Even my trainer was just a guy who worked the corner. He wasn't even my trainer. I hardly knew the guy. But I wanted the fight really bad. So I talked the commissioner into letting me fight. So I fought a guy. I weighed 177. He weighed 198. They didn't make him lose any weight. I didn't even think to make him lose any weight. I just wanted the fight. The guy let it go. As I look back on it, I'm like, are they insane? Like they let me fight this guy who was a heavyweight and I was a light heavyweight, and they let me fight him because I asked. I was adamant. Granted, I was happy they did, but in hindsight, I'm like, you guys, man, like you're the commission. Come on, man. Like that's a little crazy.
Yeah, but Russ, also Jean.
Do you remember when Otis fought Stokely Critchlow?
Yeah, he was heavy. He was like, was he 205 or something? Otis was 160. Yeah. Yeah.
But and that's crazy for the weight, but just also but in terms of the drug testing, some fighters, if a Triple G who demands VADA testing all the time, you got a guy like Nonino Donaire who would asking fighters that he do drug testing all over with VADA randomly for a full year, anytime. And Jean Pascal, how many times has he insisted on fighters trying to do additional drug testing? The infamous take the test quote at the press conference with Hopkins before the rematch. And so I do think it's on the fighters to care. It's also important that there is some discipline and they don't just have it open season, that it's a free for all for everybody, because I think to learn the right thing to do for these amateur fighters, for the future up and coming fighters, it can be very disheartening to think that you have to cheat in order to get ahead. I think you have to have that neutral playing field as much as possible even if sometimes it's not going to be easy to catch everyone.
Well, let me say one branched off issue. There's a set of rules, so-called rule, ABC rules or whatever it is. But you have, in the United States, you have 50 commissions, right? You have 50 commissions. They are all, and as I proved with me talking to that guy and letting me do the fight, and I could give you other examples of weigh-ins where it was bizarre. You're at the mercy of the guy who's in charge of the commission on that particular day. And if he thinks something isn't a big deal, it's not a big deal. I had a guy one time in Florida, and I had just moved to Florida, so I didn't know these guys. And the guy, our opponent, came in like 6 pounds heavy. So me watching it, I said, okay, well, they're going to tell him to lose it and everything. And the commissioner goes, okay, you're good. And the kid gets off the scale. And I go, well, commissioner, what do you mean he's good? He goes, oh, I go, well, he's overweight. He goes, yeah, but it's only like 4 pounds, 5 pounds. I go, you have contracts, right? Like, this is kind of a rule here. And I said to him, and I know they hated me. I'm like, listen, I go, I know I'm not from around here. I'm from New England and I'm new to here, but I said, are you people insane? Are you crazy? Like, you're the commissioner, and he actually told me, oh, if you want to do something about it, go talk to his manager. I go, you're the commissioner. What are they paying you for? Are you crazy? And this is a guy everybody knew. He's, that's what we're dealing with. So you get a guy, not me, I knew what I was doing and I enforced it. But you get a guy and he's like, well, the commissioner said it's no big deal. Well, now the guy gets annihilated the next night. And now what are we going to do? We're going to sue, or we're just going to say the commissioner, who's an idiot, said it was okay. So, you're like, everywhere is not like, I guess Las Vegas is, a well-known strict commission, so to speak. But you go to Virginia, you go to Maine, you're not going to have the same situation.
Just to echo back on what Matthew was saying, you also get people who, if they raise a claim that, hey, I want testing, you're looked upon as a troublemaker. So they don't make the match with you. No, we don't need him. He wants testing. Leave him out of this. We don't want that kind of stuff. And we saw, for whatever reason, Hopkins had no reason to go off on Jean and cause that big fight at the press conference because he asked him to do testing. He said, just take the test. What's the problem? Just take the test. And that caused the fight. That caused the fight. And it's these things shouldn't happen. You would think that someone says, of course, absolutely. Let's do it. You wouldn't be mad. But now it's even the case of, but now it's even the case of fighters are saying they're giving you short windows of time and notice for a fight. And if you don't take it, they move on to the next opponent, because if you say, okay, I'll take it, but I want testing, they say, okay, we don't need you. We'll get somebody else. And you pass up a big payday. That's sad. That's sad that happens.
But as we're discussing solutions in boxing, the way you kind of, in a way, are you saying that maybe there should be a national commission? Because that's always been a big debate across boxing, but a lot of people don't think it's feasible to have a national overseeing commission like they do in other sports.
Well, I think we just need more competent people.
That's right.
Like I say, I've dealt with some people. I can't say names, but I've dealt with some commissioners and commission people, and just insanity, what they did. Russ could tell you a few years ago, he was at a fight in Massachusetts, and remember, Russ, the birth certificate thing?
Not birth certificate.
They weren't going to let.
Not birth certificate. My social insurance number. I didn't fill out. On my paper, they asked for a social security number. I don't have a social security number. I'm not American. They said, oh, you can't work the corner. That's what you're talking about. No, you can't if you don't have a social. Yeah, but I don't have one. I can't give you something I don't have. He said to me, you should have just written anything. We don't check them anyway. And I couldn't work the corner. I was able to wrap the fight. They let me wrap his hands, but I couldn't work the corner. Right, John?
Yeah, I remember you called me and you're like, who are these people? And I knew exactly who they were.
Yeah, it was crazy. And this is a problem. I told you what happened, Matthew. I told you a couple of weeks ago what happened in San Antonio. The worst, maybe one of my worst experiences ever, although I forgot about Massachusetts, but for such a big fight, one of my worst experiences ever with the supervisors in the dressing room. Scully, I wrapped the fighter's hand. I wrapped Callum Smith's hand. And when I wrap, I make my pad right off of the roll, right? Like I don't have a pre-made pad. There was 3 people watching me, 3 from the commission and 1 from Canelo's camp watching me. So I wrapped the hand, boom, okay, no problem. When I finished, the guy takes the wrap and he's doing this with it. He's doing this. I said, what are you doing? Why are you disrupting the wrap? Why are you moving it around? He said, I have to see if there's anything in there. I said, you just watched. You watched me do it in front of you. You have to see if there's anything in there.
Right.
And then he threatened, because of my attitude, he threatened that I wouldn't work the corner.
All right. Well, there you go. That should be alarming, but that's normal. Like we go to these commissions. I remember on a similar note, and the same commission as before, Massachusetts. And I go to a fight. This is about 2 or 3 years ago. Now, when a fighter goes to a fight, goes to a weigh-in, there is nothing on the face of the earth he wants to do more than get on the scale and eat his food right away. That's it. He's been thinking about this for 8 days, right? and these guys will hang around. We get there at 12, and at 2 o'clock, we're still not on the scale. And the guys are talking, and they've got to do the paperwork. And I finally lost it. I said, listen, are you people insane? Are you insane? The scale is right there. Let these guys stand on it and then write down what it says. You can do the paperwork after, because guess what? If they don't do the paperwork, they can't fight. Let them weigh in. Let them weigh in and eat. But they couldn't understand that. They had to go by their their rule of, well, we've got to do the paperwork first. Like, oh, we've been here 2 hours. How long does it take to write your name and your address? Come on, man.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and listen, we could go on all night again with these commission stories. But speaking of things that I guess that are wrong in boxing right now, and we brought this up, Russ, it's also newsworthy. Interim titles, which been a problem for a while in boxing, but it's also getting out of control now. Not only by one organization, but it seems all four. Maybe the IBF a bit less so, but still, you're seeing a lot of them with the interim titles. And Usyk is involved in one of these rumors now that Eddie Hearn is claiming that Usyk should be fighting Joe Joyce for an interim title instead of having to fight Joshua for the real one. And you were telling me about a light heavyweight title now also that could be an interim one instead of Arthur Beterbiev, who's going to be fighting in a few weeks.
Gilberto Ramirez is it's been announced that Gilberto Ramirez is fighting Marcus Brown, who was a knockout victim of Jean Pascal's, right? Go figure that. He was a knockout victim of
Pascal. Knocked down, not knockout. Won a technical decision.
Correct. You're right. He was down 3 times in the fight. Anyways, 2 or 3 times, whatever it was. He lost. Okay. Is fighting for what's called an interim WBC light heavyweight title. Like, with all due respect to the WBC, I don't understand how you need an interim champion when your reigning champion just had his fight canceled because of COVID, is fighting in March. It's not like he's injured, retired, not fighting. It's not there. Are you trying to establish the next number 1 contender? Then just call it what it is. It's an elimination fight. That's it. That's all it is. There shouldn't be a presentation of a belt. They shouldn't have to take pictures with the world championship belt. It says world champion on it. No, that's wrong. It's wrong in any way you look at it.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable this is happening. If I didn't know this was happening and you called me and told me, I would say, Russ got the information, he read it wrong. There's no way any sane human being would do this. And I've been saying this quote for years. The people who run boxing are not the people who love boxing. That has been proven to me hundreds and hundreds of times. The trainers and the fighters are the ones, the cut men, they're the ones who love boxing.
But Scully, Scully, I'm gonna play devil's advocate here on this one. Yeah. The fighters pay a sanction fee for this. The fighters pay for the belts. The organizations put this little candy out there, this little bait, and the fighters, they don't say, no, I don't want to fight. No, they figure out a way to pay for it. They negotiate it into their purse. And I'm not just talking for interim belt. I'm not just talking. Yeah. All kinds of titles. I told you the story with Buddy McGirt when Buddy was on the phone with us, right? Yeah. The fighters pay for this, so they are part and parcel to blame.
Well, I tell you 2 things. You remember, and I loved it. Do you remember Antonio Tarver and Glenn Johnson? Do you remember that fight? Their first fight, I think it was on HBO. The people wanted them, the sanction bodies wanted to charge them big money, like to unify. And they both agreed. They go, we don't need it. We're just going to fight. And one of us we'll call ourselves the champion. And that one of those fights between them was not for the official belts. And I was hoping it was going to catch on and everybody was going to love it. It didn't. Everybody still wants to pay the sanction fees. And I think I've mentioned this before to you, maybe in private, but my theory, which I'm positive I'm right. Do you know what the theory is behind the WBC, how this started, all these different titles? Because remember, they came out with African titles, Hispanic titles, youth titles, all this stuff. Do you remember when it happened? Something big happened in boxing, and the WBC started doing this after, and it's been all downhill ever since. Did I ever tell you about that?
No, okay.
1998, Michael Nunn fights Graziano Racciani. Well, Michael Nunn was supposed to fight Roy Jones. The fight was set. The purses were set. Everything was set. Roy decided he didn't want to fight Michael Nunn. he wanted Michael Nunn to beat somebody else first, or whatever the reason was. So they stripped Roy, or Roy vacated. The WBC made Ratchagiani and Nunn the world title fight for WBC title. They go over there, and I just talked to Michael yesterday, and he told me again. He goes, "I beat that guy Ratchagiani. They robbed me. They robbed me over there." But anyway, he lost split decision. So Ratchagiani's WBC champion. Later on, the WBC decided to reinstate Roy as champion. So they're like, "Well, what are you talking about? Ratchagiani's WBC." And they said, "No, that was interim title." And so they went to court. Ratchagiani took them to court. You can Google this. He took them to court. He said, nowhere in the pre-fight did you ever say, not on the poster, not on the press release, not in the contract. It never said interim. It said outright title. He won the case. He won millions.
Yeah, it was like 25 million or something.
No, more than that. He won so much, the WBC told him, "We can't give it all to you. We'll go bank. We'll have to go out of business. We'll give you a certain amount every year." That's after that happened, they got to recoup the money through sanction fees. That's when all the titles, they came out with African titles. They came out with Hispanic titles, but or Latin titles. And
Latino.
Right. Yeah. Right. But here's the thing. You would think that means some guy from Venezuela fights a guy from Colombia. No, you could be a Puerto Rican guy from New York and fight for that title.
Yeah, of course.
You can be the youth title. You have to be 23 years old or less. Well, Chad Dawson, when I had him, won the youth title. He beat a guy that was 35 years old in that fight. He was a good fighter, but he was 35 years old. The same thing with the African title. The African, all that means is if you get an African American from Illinois, he can fight for it. They want sanctions.
Yeah, it was $31 million he was awarded.
31
million.
Okay.
There you go.
Was it? Okay, I said 25. Lots more. Okay, it was 6 million.
6 million's a lot of money. But it was enough. They couldn't pay it.
Yeah, that's right. Wasn't there also a case of two European guys fighting for the NABF title?
I think so. Yeah. But insane. Just what it's almost like. It's almost like years ago they used to do stuff and they would go, I don't think that'll work. Now they're just going. One guy's in the back room telling Suleiman like, that's insane, and he goes, "Watch, nobody will say a word. Let's do it." And they just do it.
Yeah, but
he's right.
And he's right. It's nobody. And I've actually emailed. I have a database of like 150 media members, and I emailed a bunch of them, and I go, "Hey, are any of you gonna say anything or what? Is anybody gonna write an article and say something?" You have these guys, and I showed you the other day, who I didn't even realize the guy. And here's how crazy it is. I forgot his name. There's a heavyweight guy. There's a heavyweight guy that says they got him as a WBA champion interim.
Manuel Char.
I don't know who this is. No offense to him, but I don't even know who he is. He's fighting a guy, a Jamaican guy. What's his name? Lloyd or Brian? Something Brian. Bryan.
Matthew.
I think his last name is Brian.
Matthew will tell us.
Well,
Carry on.
In any event, they are fighting each other for the WBA interim heavyweight title. And everybody goes, okay. But I go, well, wait a minute. I think Joshua's the WBA heavyweight champion. Like, you have two guys fighting for the interim title, but Anthony Joshua's there. Like, he must be like, hey, you guys see me, right? Like, I have the belt. You can't have the belt. I have the belt. So there's going to be two WBA heavyweight champions. Somebody should go to prison or an insane asylum for this. This is insanity.
But you know what happens also, guys, is that, and Trevor Bryan's the fighter that Manuel Charles is going to be fighting in Hollywood, Florida, scheduled for the end of the month. And I think what also is the entertainment factor of the networks being involved more and more in television, they push these belts a lot, and they have some blame as well, because in many cases, every time they're promoting, they want to say it's for a title, for a championship. It looks more prestige, and it kind of tricks people who are casual fans or don't really follow the sport. So they don't know the difference now between the real champions. That's a big problem.
People have no idea what this is. They have no clue. But I'll tell you one thing, and I guarantee you this, and this will be true for the next million years. There will never, ever, ever, ever be a 12-year-old kid in the gym telling someone, when I grow up, I want to be the interim heavyweight champ. That's never going to happen. Nobody's going to say no. And listen, I honestly feel, and I'm different. People may doubt me, but I'm different. If I was fighting today and I won an interim belt, I would absolutely say to the reporters, I know this isn't real. I want to fight whoever the real guy is. I want to fight him. I took the fight because it's a fight and it's against a good guy and I made money. But I know, and because you know, and all the fighters know, I'm not the world champion. And I'm not going to pretend that I'm legitimate until I beat whoever that guy is. I don't want to be in a history book like this.
Can you imagine how many other people could have called themselves interim champion in fights that they fought, which were elimination fights to make them the mandatory number one challenger? All those people were interim champions. Now, the first time I ever heard of interim champion, and I don't remember the name, but a fighter.
Jimmy Bivens.
No. This was recent when they introduced the interim titles. There was a fighter who either as a result of an injury, a severe injury, he was out for an extended period of time, but they didn't want to strip him of his title because he suffered a serious injury and couldn't defend the title, but they wanted to keep the division active. So they said, let's have an interim title. And when this guy comes back, he has to fight the interim champion.
That's what it's supposed to be in theory. Yeah, that's what the title, if you're going to have one, that's the reason.
I thought, that's pretty smart. Like, that's a good thing. You're not stripping a guy, who's not there anymore, because he's legitimately injured. All these guys can't sit around and wait because one guy is injured and you can't get a shot at the title until he's ready and may never come back. So people could waste a year or more of their life waiting for someone to come back. So, hey, let's have an interim champion and if the champion comes back and says, I don't want to fight this guy, you're not champion anymore. You've been gone for a year and a half. You don't deserve to be champion anymore.
Well, I'll say this. If I'm commissioner and a guy is forced to be out for a year, because if you're out for a year because different things happen, a fight falls out, like with Arthur, you can't strip him.
No, I'm saying because he's injured.
Right, no, but I was saying if a guy's injured, I say, look, we're going to strip you. We're going to have these two guys fight for the title. You'll be first in line to fight the winner. We'll do that. Because interim, like I say, Joe Louis was in war for years. Like, that's why Jimmy Bivens was the thing. But if a guy can't defend the title physically in a certain amount of time, well, I could see stripping him. But it's just, my big thing is the history of boxing. Like, when we look back, I mean, no offense to the guys, but you look back one day, 50 years from now, and people are going to go, yeah, this guy, Trevor Bryan was the champ, Manuel Char was heavyweight champ. How do you explain that to people when they look and they go, no, he wasn't champ. This guy Joshua was. They go, no, he was too. They go, no, they're at the same time. They go, yeah, at the same time. How do you justify or explain that?
Well, you know how, John, I'm going to tell you how. And I think boxing in and of itself is happy that the sport has been removed from the mainstream. It's almost become like just underground. So you can do whatever you want and no one takes notice of it. I was looking the other day, there was, the fighters that made the cover of Sports Illustrated when it meant something to win a fight, when you were the welterweight champion, when Duran beat Palomino, made the cover of Sports Illustrated, because that was important, that Duran moved up from lightweight to welterweight and beat Palomino. And This was important stuff. Now it doesn't matter. And you can now go ahead and put all the freak shows on you want. You can have McGregor fight Mayweather. You can have Jake Paul fight. And you can do all this stuff. And it doesn't matter. Like it's irrelevant to the sport. It's basically become a free for all. You can do what you want. Imagine right now there's something like 96 people or more are recognized as world champions. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, but wait a second, Russ. Also, because you brought up now the celebrity thing of boxing, you were saying it was kind of a good thing for the sport sometimes, and Mike Tyson, other fighters are saying we should embrace it because it's visibility for the sport. But while you're here, what's your thoughts on? We saw with the Tyson Roy Jones pay-per-view the amount of pay-per-view buys and the amount of hype that event generated versus some of the top fights like a Teofimo Lopez Lomachenko fight, and you're kind of sitting back as boxing fans, I think, as saying, okay, maybe this is a good thing for some visibility, but at the same time, I think it takes away from, again, people realizing the true sweet science of it and who the real fighters are versus kind of the people who are trying to make money off of it.
Right. Well, most casual fans and idiots, like my brother, like they thought it was real. They thought it was real. Like they have no idea. They have literally no idea what's going on. That not a clue. All they know is those guys are punching each other, so they must be trying to win and knock each other out. And one of them won. And
well, you don't think it was fixed that Nate Robertson got knocked out?
No, not at all. No, not at all. I'm just saying people don't know, but it wasn't a real fight in terms of their record. It didn't go on their record, and it was for entertainment. It was for fun. Now, I'm not a fan of the whole. It's turning into more and more of a circus. And the problem is because it's one thing if you have Jake Paul, right? And okay, he made all that money. It's fine. But now you got him talking about beating Canelo. And it's getting insane because the boxing fans that we're drawing are so clueless. It's bizarre what they're saying. I talk to guys and I had a guy, he thinks Jake Paul could beat, and he's naming all these guys he could beat, and I'm saying he couldn't beat anyone. There's no one as a real pro that he could beat. Forget it. I mean, you're talking about this basketball player. I mean, he beat a basketball player. That's the sad thing.
Yeah, that's the sad thing. And if I go back to my time in my era, when Regis Levesque, God rest his soul, passed away, he wanted to make a fight between Joe Frazier and Robert Cleroux here in Montreal. The commission wouldn't allow him to do it because he said they were in their 40s, or I don't know if they'd even reached their 40s, late 30s, and they wouldn't allow them to do it because they were too old. And now anybody can do an exhibition. Anybody can do that. And you know what? In a way, I don't really have an issue with Roy and Mike doing what they did because
well, not Roy and Mike, I'm saying the Jake and the other people getting on board of this.
Well, the Jake getting on board, and this is what we discussed earlier, the fact that Jake was allowed to beat up on a basketball player and knock him dead is wrong just from a protective standpoint. Like that fight should, if both those guys were two amateurs in a gym, the guy who had Nate Robinson would have said, the coach, he would have said, he's not ready yet. I got a green kid, but he's not. They never would have taken a fight against that other kid that they know, nah, your kid's too good. You wouldn't have even made that fight. That's sad, But the fact that somebody like Paul can come over, Jake Paul can come over from social media background of being on YouTube, bring all his fans and say he wants to fight. Scully, if you were a promoter or a manager and had a guy like that and you could put him on a 4-rounder in an undercard fight, against a regular guy, right, that you'd pick, and he brought all those people and you could get $500,000 for your kid in a 4-rounder, you would take it. That's okay.
Yeah. Right. With that. But my problem is just like the influx of people who think it's just like when McGregor and Mayweather fought. There were people who thought McGregor was going to kill him because he was too big. And I'm going, you have no knowledge, but because you have a forum and you pay to watch the fight, you're able to put this opinion out. It'd be like me going to a ballet and talking about the people, oh, that guy sucks. his dancing sucks. And they're like, what are you talking about? That guy's the best dancer on earth. And I'm like, nah, I don't like the way he sucks. And I can say that, and people can, then I'll get people to go, yeah, that guy from Russia, he sucks. It's just, it's frustrating for people who are in the game to have to, it's like when I tell you what, Russ knows, you go to a fight, and I'm a magnet for this freaking guy. I go to a fight, I'm always going to get the guy who's there with a girl who knows nothing, and he doesn't know anything, but he spends the whole fight, the whole show, telling her what's going on. Oh, the reason he's jabbed, and then he'll yell out like he knows the guy. Like he's friends with the guy in the ring to impress this girl. She thinks she's dating Eddie Futch, and everybody around there, and everybody in the area is going, "Will you please shut up? Just shut up!" I always sit next to that guy, but those are the guys that drive the market. They pay for the most tickets, apparently.
Yeah.
And social media is not going to help with that, because you're seeing more and more people just with opinions on everything. And so, look, it's going to be profitable for a lot of people, and we're just going to have to live through it. There's a few minutes left with you guys here. We could go all night, of course, but I want to get on some of the topics. As Ice, you brought up Beterbiev, and Russ also indirectly with the WBC interim thing. He's going to be back in the ring soon. We'd hope. He hasn't fought since Vosdik. And for those who don't know, Ice has been working with Beterbiev and Arthur for a few fights now, and I just wanted your take, guys, on how that started and what, like, in your experience with all the fighters you've trained, where does Arthur rank in terms of talent and discipline?
Now tell him the full story, Scully. Tell him the full story before you talk about your. Yeah.
Well, it was 5 years ago this March. My first training camp with Arthur was March of 2016, and
Back up.
I was saying Russ called me and said, would you be interested in coming up? They want to know if you want to come up and
back up. Well, back up.
The man finished his story.
When he fought Cloud.
No, because this is I said to Scully, this would have been around Beterbiev's maybe second, third fight, or maybe.
No, I'll tell you when. Okay. When he fought Tavoris Cloud.
Wow, that's right.
And you said, Scully, we've got this guy. He's unbelievable. He's fighting Tavoris Cloud. I go, oh, what's his record? And he's like 5-0. And I go, man, you sure? And Russ is like, we're sure. We're sure. And I'm like, really? I go, Tavoris Cloud just fought Hopkins like 6 months ago. He went 12 rounds with him. He just lost his title. And I said 5-0. And he goes, you'll see. It was a 2-round fight. He blew him out. And Mark said after the fight, Arthur was confused. He was like, you told me he was good. He was not good. And so I went up and worked with him for that first camp. And we did the pads, and he, it was beautiful because, I was saying to myself, what am I really going to show this guy? Like, he's a decorated fighter. He's a great amateur. He's, obviously he's a killer, the whole nine, but he's different. His mentality is different. Like, I've had guys I trained over here who weren't a tenth of what Arthur is. And they'll be like, oh no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to take your advice on that thing, but Arthur, I show him something and I'll see him an hour later in the corner of the gym practicing the exact move, and he'll practice it for hours and hours. Like, he's focused on it. He's like a sponge. He's like a young kid, but he's a champion. But he's like a young kid who wants to learn these new things. And so I worked with him. I showed him some stuff that I thought would work, and it worked. Boy, we did some body work. I showed him some moves on how to get cleaner body shots, and he stopped this one poor guy like 6 times in one day with body shots. And he goes, oh, thank you for showing me. I go, yeah, I don't think that guy's happy I showed you that.
I remember,
but,
I remember telling Scully, I said, Scully, this guy can punch like nobody you've ever seen. I mean, this is, he says he's 5-0, you know, like Tavoris Cloud is, you know, he's been around. I said, Scully, you got it. And after he saw, he said, wow, you know, and
yeah.
yeah.
I'll tell you how hard he hits, right? Two quick stories. We had a kid come in that was literally 215 pounds. Arthur's 175. The guy comes in. He was a highly decorated amateur. He won everything. He was he had like 7 or 8 pro fights. So I'm telling him, like, all right, now, you know, you got to be careful with the guy. You know, I know you're a big guy, but you got to be careful. And he goes, oh, you know, I sparred, and he named all these big heavyweights he sparred. And I go, all right, you know, just be careful. Just be careful. And he comes back after the first round, and I'll never forget. He goes, well, that was different. You know, he had a whole new respect. But we had another guy who was a good fighter as well. As an amateur in the United States, he won everything. And as a pro, he told me he had sparred with this one and that one and everything. I never saw this before in my life. He was sparring with Arthur for a couple weeks, and every day he'd be like, man, this guy, it's hard. It's crazy. And one day he gets hit with a shot, and I've never seen this. In 40 years, I've never seen this. He stepped back and he screams and he goes, this can't be good for me. And he got out, and that was his last day. He went home. So I've never seen that, you know. So you can just imagine the daily buildup of him. Just, I got to spar with this guy again. This guy's gonna hit me again, and he hit him that one day, and he just had enough. Psychologically, emotionally, mentally, he gave up. He quit. He was ready to go home.
And those are the stories.
That's what people are dealing with. Yeah.
Yeah, and those are the stories, and why kind of
awesome.
the hype of Arthur 15-0 with 15 knockouts, that even though there's maybe a language barrier a little bit, although he's progressing with that, and he has a good personality, and there's kind of an intrigue and a mystique about Arthur, which is why some people would love to see a fantasy fight of him versus a 175-pound version of Canelo. And let me ask you, like, your thoughts of, like, let's say, I know it's not realistic, of course, in the near future, but if that fight were to happen or something, how do you see it go? Like, do you think anybody at 175 can beat a guy like Arthur right now, although he's 35, but hasn't had too much, you know, wear and tear?
Right. Well, here's my thing. Boxing people, it's not necessarily the fighters, it's the management, the promotion. You know, they're smart people, and they have a lot of money invested, so they're wise with what they do with their money. The fact that Canelo went right back down to 168 after he beat Kovalev told me all I need to know. Like, they knew, they're not stupid people. They know Arthur's a different proposition. And Canelo is a small man physically. He's at middleweight. He was a small guy. He would look like Gary Coleman. If you know who Gary Coleman was, he would look like Gary Coleman next to Arthur. Maybe I'm biased, but I can't see Canelo taking Arthur's. If Arthur caught him with 3 clean shots in a row, jab, right hand, left hook, I can't see Canelo not being like, this can't be good for me. You know, I just can't see it. I just can't see it. You know, now, granted, let me just say one thing. Now, granted, he's a very good fighter.
Yes.
And if we were in camp, I would not underestimate him in the least. I would tell Arthur, this is the toughest fight of your career, because the fact that he's so good, Canelo, but he's small, could be an advantage to a degree. The same way it was for Pacquiao when he fought Margarito. It was an advantage to be that fast, but to be that small and that smart, but still carry that power. So Arthur would have to be on his game, but I would think if he fights the right fight, I can't see Canelo taking the punches. I just can't.
Well, Canelo doesn't take punches. Canelo has evolved into being one of the best defensive fighters, a real throwback, you know, that he doesn't take that. And if you want to use another example, I was going to say, you know, when Ray Leonard fought Donnie Lalonde, you know, Donnie was so much bigger than him, you know, like a massive size difference, but it didn't matter. The speed was just, and then when Ray went down back to 154 to fight Terry, it was a disaster. So sometimes smallness is an advantage. And I'd be
Right.
really worried that, you know, Arthur's got these two atom bombs in each hand and they keep detonating in the desert, you know, and not hitting anything. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
no
Yeah, yeah.
casualties, you know, that's a big
Right.
problem. That's a big
Right,
problem.
right. Oh yeah, for sure. Like I say, we'd have to fight the right fight and the
Yeah.
smart fight. You know, I would never in a million years. You know, I've learned my lesson 100 times. You know, I would never underestimate a guy like Canelo, because he showed me a lot in the Kovalev fight. Like he showed me, I mean, his technique. I mean, he's A class, 100%.
Yeah, he is. I called him. I said after the Callum Smith fight, I said he might be the most complete fighter in boxing that we've seen since Andre Ward, probably. Like Andre could do almost everything: inside, outside, southpaw, right hand. Do it. It wasn't a big punch, wasn't a huge puncher, but he could do everything. And Canelo has evolved into that, in my opinion. He can do everything. You know, he fights tall guys, short guys, big guys. He outboxes them. Defense, power, speed, balance. He's complete. He's as complete as you can be as a fighter.
In closing,
100%.
Because in Canelo, one of his training partners now, not obviously as somebody they spar, but Ryan Garcia, who's in the Reynoso camp with Canelo's guidance and tutelage. He fought a few weeks ago. That's the one division right now, Ice, that I think gives optimism for boxing fans, because the young guns at 135, the 135-pound, the lightweight division, whether it be Teofimo Lopez, Tank Davis, Garcia, Devin Haney, they seem to be wanting to fight each other. They're young, they're entertaining. What's your take on that division right now? Do you think Lopez is head and shoulders above the rest, or do you think Ryan Garcia and the other ones there are going to make for exciting fights in the next few years?
I mean, me personally, I mean, I don't know if he's head and shoulders, but he's, you know, he proves himself. I mean, that was a very impressive performance. But that division is so hot. It's so interesting. It's so exciting, especially for people that really know these guys. You know, I mean, they're not mainstream guys, the majority of them, you know, like Devin Haney. I wouldn't say he's mainstream, but obviously we know who he is, and we know that these guys are talented. Tank Davis, you know, has got the power, and they have hype machines behind them. Teofimo, I mean, it's a good time. It's either a good time or a really bad time to be in that weight class, depending on how you look at it.
And you know, and Matthew, with all due respect, he loses one fight, and you forget to mention him in the
Lomachenko.
And Lomachenko, to me, is still the best guy there. And I think there's a certain amount of unfinished business with Lopez. You know, I think if ever a fight begged for a rematch, that's one of them, because it was one of those fights where one guy jumps into a big lead, the other guy's not even in the fight. And then in the next half of the fight, he catches up. It's like the sprinter, you know, he's coming down the stretch. You say, well, is he going to catch him? You know, the horse is coming up. So I think he's still a player in this division. This guy's still a talented fighter. You know, you don't just write him off because he lost to Teofimo Lopez. You know, he's a legitimate guy.
100%.
So before we go, Matthew,
the internet stories with Scully.
Yeah, we have to clear up, because, you know, John, as great as a boxing mind as he could be, and like I said earlier, it was only, you know, a few months ago, maybe it's a year now, maybe, you know, as time has passed over a year, that he discovered WhatsApp, and that you can call all over the world for free. Because back in our day, every time we went somewhere, you bought calling cards. And I got this card. I got 120 minutes on this card for $5. Call anywhere. And this was like really something great. And so John was introduced to WhatsApp, and I thought that was a great text story, you know, of somebody like not knowing. But he has one that's even better, and I'll let him tell that story.
I can beat that story, and that's a good story. But listen, I got on the internet in 1998. I remember the day it happened, and I never even, until 1998, I didn't even know what the internet was. I never heard of it, right? And my friend was on it, and he was on AOL, and he was instant messaging with his wife. And I went, "You're talking to her right now?" He goes, "Yeah, that's her talking to me right back." I went out the next day. I got on it. Now that's 1998. 2006. I'm at my friend's house, a fighter by the name of Chris Mills. I'm at his house in Pennsylvania. We're down in the basement. Our wives are upstairs hanging out. So he goes, "Oh, check out this video on YouTube." And it's a video of a fight or something, a street fight or something. And I'm hearing all the people talking on the video, and I go, "You get sound? YouTube has sound?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Don't you have sound?" I go, "No, how do you get sound?" He goes, "Speakers." I go, "Computers have speakers?" I went 7 years watching YouTube. I thought it was just video.
Well, and listen, and the phone went down a few times during the recording today. Like, I got knocked down a few times, but look, we were able to do the whole thing without too many issues there. So it's a step in the right direction. I think we're progress, right?
Hey,
Yes, sir.
on the attack on the Twin Towers, Scully told me about it on an AOL chat. That's how he told me.
Yeah,
what was
yeah.
going on.
I was on AOL Messenger. It was a crazy day. I was on AOL Instant Messenger with people who were messaging me going, "Oh, I'm at work. We don't have a TV. What's going on?" And I was telling people all across the country, "Oh man, here comes the second plane. I think it's going to hit the building." And they're like, "What?" And that was a crazy day. But yeah, AOL connected me to all my, dozens of people across the country. It was pretty cool.
And outside the country, because you were telling
and you too. I was telling you too. Yeah.
And we're able to do this video and sound this evening, guys. So I appreciate so much your time. And listen, we're gonna have you on again in the future for sure. Thanks for being the inaugural guest on the Calling Russ Anber podcast here, and we'll be in touch for sure. And Russ, I don't know if you have any final words here for this evening.
No, I think this shows you what, how passionate John is, and what, not only accomplished in the world of boxing, and that's rare to be accomplished in the world of boxing, but also love it and be the fan that he is. So we've been friends since June of 1988. Am I correct?
January. Well,
January.
We met in January.
1988. And, we've been not just friends, but confidants, trusted people. And I consider him one of my dearest friends, not just for boxing, but in life. And every decision I made in handling fighters, everything, I always called two people, Vinny Curto and John Scully, and made pretty good decisions all the way along. So I'm happy about it.
Yes, sir. Full circle.
Thanks, Scully. Thanks for being here, buddy.
Yes, sir, man. Awesome. I'll see you guys.
Talk soon, guys.
All right, Matt. Talk to you later.